This series is called Behind the Brand. We talk a lot about brands and branding. I want to ask what the Jocko brand is. But before we go there, how do you look at brand? Like, how do you define what a brand is? Have you thought about this?
Not really. And sometimes when people start to ask me about brand and branding, I feel unqualified to answer because I didn't scratch my head, get out a piece of paper, and start coming up with ideas for a brand. I didn't do that, and I still don't do that. I am a person, not a brand. And so this is who I am. I've tried to make sure that what I put into the world reflects who I am. And I try not to put things out into the world that don't reflect who I am. But the who I am, which is, if you are going to call it a brand, is not something that I created for the purpose of putting out there. It's just who I ended up being. And then I try and put things out in the world that reflect who I am as a human. So I'm a human being and not a brand.
Yeah. I love that answer. We had Seth Godin on here. Seth is like one of the godfathers of brand marketing. And he said the same thing to me. He goes, Brian, I'm not a brand, I'm a human. But I push back a little bit on that. Yes, you are a human, but you're also a brand, or you could be seen as a brand. And I think, people who are thinking about this idea, I actually think your advice is excellent. Because what you're saying is just you should walk the talk. So like your values, the things whatever you put out there in the world, however people experience you when they come up and shake your hand, meet you, grapple with you, in the octagon out there, whatever, like that should be aligned with, the products that you make or the books that you write. Like, a brand is really a shorthand for what you stand for. If people, the example that Seth gave me is, he said, close your eyes and, imagine if Nike built a hotel. What would that look like? What would that smell like? What kind of facilities and, amenities would it have? Can you imagine what that is? And if the answer is yes, then Nike probably has a brand, right? If Hyatt made a pair of shoes, now try and imagine what the Hyatt sneaker looks like. It's more difficult to do, right? And that's because Hyatt has a brand, but it's not as distinctive as Nike is, right? Their brand is maybe to appeal to the masses. It's to be available on every street corner when you need it. It's about price. And, when you go and you Google it, they're among one of the lowest, so their brand is about ubiquity or access wherever you are in the world. Versus exclusivity or being special. And so I think a brand is a shorthand for what you stand for. And it should also be distinct or distinctive. And I think the Jocko brand, in my experience or my opinion, is distinctive. And the other thing is, are people willing to stand in line for it? Are they willing to pay us a little premium for a brand? If you have a generic, all of us are probably about the generic brand of something. And, we're not willing to pay more for it. That's why we want to buy the generic. We want the cheapest version, or we want, we don't care who makes it. But when you put your name on it, like Jocko Fuel, we have a certain expectation, of the person who made it and what it stands for. And the interesting thing is that the brand kind of lives in the hearts, minds, and maybe stomach of the people who experience your brand, right? So it's like you create this thing called Jocko Fuel, and now I'm consuming it, and I form an opinion, and now I have an opinion about the Jocko brand, right? And now you don't have much control. It's like now I have the control, like what I think. And I think, it tastes pretty good. And then I look at the ingredients. Increased focus, balanced energy, supports memory. Oh, there's like no sugar. Oh, this is not a Red Bull. This is actually pretty healthy, right? And then I start forming opinions. So I think brand is actually something that merits thinking a lot about. I mean, you sort of articulated it in a very non-scientific way, but it's actually spot on. Like you're just being authentic.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of the idea of Nike Hotel, but yes, I think pretty much anyone that knows me could make my hotel for me, and it would be pretty. I bet most people would get it pretty close.
And before this was invented, if you said, I'm Jocko and I'm going to invent Jocko Fuel, I would have bet money that it would be healthy.
Yeah.
That it wouldn't be full of sugar. They would have legit ingredients. I'll bet wherever this is manufactured, it's not like slave labor or, like.
It is definitely not.
Right? Like all these things that go along with your brand, you don't even think about these things, but it's like what you do and what you say actually does matter because people will form this opinion of it. And if you're not walking the talk and it's not congruent with your brand, then, that's when I think things don't work out.
Yeah, so I think I've just made a connection that I hadn't made before, and I think it's going to land pretty well with what you're saying, or it's going to support what you're saying. So I grew up in the SEAL teams. In the SEAL teams, your reputation is the most important thing, and it follows you from the day you start SEAL training until you retire and after you retire. So you don't want to hurt your reputation ever. You want to uphold your reputation. The reason you want to uphold your reputation is your reputation reflects the reputation of the SEAL teams itself. So you never want to tarnish that. So I think that for me, the reason that I guess you could say that my brand is confined the way it is and represented the way it is just I think about it subconsciously from a reputational mindset of, I'm going to have people ingesting things that I made that have my name on them. They're going to be as good as they can possibly be. I'm going to have people wearing clothing that they know is from my company. They're going to have the highest quality, and yes, it's going to be made here in the United States of America. My consulting company, if you come to one of my events, it will be the best event that you have ever been to. And all those things aren't based on me thinking, hey, I've got to uphold the brand. I don't think of it that way. What I think of is, hey, this is the reputation. This is the reputation of the companies. This is the reputation of my name. Therefore, indirectly, the reputation of the SEAL teams and the reputations of America. So I guess that's what I think about. I don't think of it as a brand thing. I think of it as a reputation, and I don't think you would have to stretch very far being a brand focused person to make the connection between me thinking about the reputation and the way other people might think about a brand.
I think you're spot on. Yeah. And then I think, whether you're a human who has a personal brand like you do, or you're a big consumer brand like, let's say, Patagonia or, one of these big established blue chip brands. And then you have opportunities to do stuff. Like I saw this, what's that company that's having a moment right now? They make those big giant cups that all the women love to buy. They're like the Stanley cups.
Okay.
Are you familiar with Stanley?
Negative.
Stanley's having a moment. I mean, they're like a 100-year-old company, but they've suddenly become extremely popular with a certain female demographic, right? And they're like this tall. It's for people who drink water all day long. My wife has several of these Stanley cups, and they're like $50 a piece. But apparently, they keep liquids, particularly water, very cold, very insulative, and then they're like bulletproof. And this woman, I guess, her car was parked somewhere and some sort of natural disaster happened. Her car caught on fire and burned to the ground almost, but the Stanley Cup inside survived and the water was still cold. And the CEO found out about this story because she shared it on social and somehow got back to the brand Stanley. And the CEO came on and said, "This is really unfortunate. It's amazing that your Stanley Cup survived. We want to do something that we probably won't do again, but we want to replace your car for you. And we're so happy that you love your Stanley so much. We're going to send you a new Stanley Cup and we're going to replace." So like they stepped up That's not what they stand for, but it's like that was a pretty good move, pretty bold move for the brand, and I think that we have opportunities to do that, to represent, like what our reputation, right? It can precede us, or we can get in front of it.
For sure. The drink that you're drinking right now. So as we formulated that, one of the things that I didn't want to do was add chemical preservatives to it. The only way to make that happen was to pasteurize it like you pasteurize milk, which is through heat. There were no lines that canned drinks like this with a pasteurization part to them. And so we worked with a manufacturer and waited an extra almost a year to put this out. Why? Because we held the line. Because we did not want to, I wanted to make something that my kids could drink. And that's what we do with every part of this. And it's the same thing with the clothing that we make at Origin.
Well, was this more expensive to do the pasteurization?
It's absolutely more expensive.
But it was worth it to you because that's
100%.
you stand for.
Yes, 100%.
How about the protein? I've seen the protein drinks. Talk about that too.
Same thing. So there's a lot of filler you could put in there. There's also, it's hard to make a protein shake taste good. And so you can put sugar in there, which makes it taste good. You can put artificial sweeteners in there, which make it taste good. And I said no to those two things. So we ended up with monk fruit, which is a natural sweetener. We eventually added fermented cane sugar, which is another natural sweetener. And that's what we did. Is it more expensive? Yes. Is it better for you? Yes. So that's what we're doing.
How involved were you? I mean, it sounds like you were very involved from the get, but like, were you part of the formulation team? Were you part of the packaging? Like, how much say did you have or want to have in this?
I'm involved in every aspect. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously I don't use what's the program? I don't use Adobe Illustrator for the packaging, but I say more black. I say this color. We have experts that actually run it. It's the same thing with formulation. I might say, hey, I definitely want to have this ingredient in there, and then they can sort of calculate. Yeah, here's how we can do it. Here's what would be an efficacious dose, that type of thing. So yes, I'm involved in all of it. But we have the experts that make it happen.
Yeah. And then how do you make like cosmetic or aesthetic decisions? Is that just gut? Like, this is black with orange highlights. I mean, I almost see you in a black t-shirt 90% of the time. Is that just your brand? Like you're that guy?
Yeah. I mean, I like the color black.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So we end up with some predominantly black packaging. But at the same time, you also, once you get into, now that we're a lot bigger, you have to understand the psychology of the consumer, and you want to make sure that they can clearly and easily understand what it is. They can clearly and easily understand what the benefits are. They can clearly understand what differentiates what we make from what other people make. And so you have to, once you start doing that, you got to talk to the consumer.
Yeah.
You've got to get their feedback. You've got to run A/B tests, A, B, D, C, E, F, G tests to see what stands out, to make sure that you are conveying the messages you want to convey. And at the same time, making sure that there's continuity and that you stay close, that you stay on the path of the truth, which is, again, to me, if I'm making a pink can, that's not really my personality. So we're not making a pink can. So
who's it for, though? Who is the audience? Who do you have in mind?
Well, I've made stuff since the beginning for me. In the beginning of Jocko Fuel, I actually only made what I wanted and what I needed. The first deviation we made from that was vanilla. We made vanilla protein. I don't voluntarily get vanilla, so I didn't make vanilla. It was most proteins that would be the second, maybe third flavor that you make. For us, it was pretty far down the line. But yeah, so I am, the initial audience, but what I do pay attention to is people that are on the same path as me and what their demand signal is. So if there's demand signal for vanilla, we make vanilla, because I know that people have different taste buds and people have different needs, but people do want things that are efficacious. They want things that they can trust, and that's what we do. So if there's something that maybe is not in something that I would use every day, we make it, but we make a version of it that people can trust and is clean and good for them.
Yeah, break it down a little bit further, like, because I know a lot of people are thinking about this for their own companies or products or services. It's like, how do you know the consumer? Like, who else is on your signal? Like, what does that person look like? Is it predominantly men? Is it 50-50 men to women? Is it young people, older people, people who live, what's the psychographic? Like,
so for what aspect of my life? So, and let me rephrase that. It's not even for what aspect of my life. Here's the deal. I go out and I have a podcast. I have a consulting company. I have a supplement food company. I have a clothing company. What I've been lucky enough to be able to do is I talk to my people all the time. And, the podcast is a little bit of a one-way conversation, but I go out all the time. I meet people from that listen to my podcast all the time. And then I go out and do live events. And when I go out and do live events, I meet my people that I have a good relationship with all the time. Who are they? What's the demographic? I'll tell you what the demographic is. They're human beings that want to get better. That's what they are. They're human beings that want to be better. Are they bankers, investment bankers? Yes. Are they bricklayers? Yes. Are they truck drivers? Yes. Are they working on a farm? Yes. Are they selling insurance? Yes. Are they housewives? Yes. Are they moms and dads? Yes. Yes. Are they college kids? Yes. Are they high school students? Yes. They are human beings that want to get better. That's who I interact with all the time. That's who listens to my podcast. That's who reads my books. That's who takes my supplements. That's who buys my clothes. That's who hires my consulting company. It's people that want to improve themselves and get better.
I like it. That resonates with me, and maybe that's very clear why I listen too, because I want to get better too.